Hello, everyone, and welcome to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer, Logan Landers, and joining me to talk about, we're already in the fifth week of the NCAA season already. It's going to be a good one. Georgia, Auburn is my man, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. How you doing today, sir?
Hey man, I'm doing excellent today, and I'm hoping that after we do this preview, all the Georgia fans and the Auburn fans will be very appreciative of what we have to say about their teams today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll get into that in just a moment. If you enjoy the video here today, once again, please give us a like, comment, share, subscribe on Facebook and YouTube, our main two hubs for content. If you enjoy podcasts, well, you are in luck because we do have a podcast comes out each and every single week with all of our game previews and all the other videos we do each and every week with legends interviews, looking back at old history episodes and whatnot, doing old games, players, you name it, you can find it on our channel. Once again, that's just look under any podcast stream platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iTunes, etc. at 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. Same names you see on the screen, and you can find all of our podcasts as well. Well, Vincent, it is time. Georgia, Auburn, a big shootout in the SEC this upcoming week. Georgia comes into this matchup, of course, ranked the number one team in the country, a perfect 4-0 on the year. Going on the road for the first time, though, as they go to Jordan-Hare and take on the Auburn Tigers in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Let's get into Georgia, what they can do to win this ball game, and how they can improve to a perfect 5-0. Well, I think obviously when you look at this Georgia team, starting with the offense first and foremost, it is ran through Carson Beck. It's going to be his first road start of his career, something to look at there. But so far this year, he has looked tremendous for Georgia, has not skipped a beat, taking over from Stetson Bennett, completing nearly 73% of his passes, thrown for well over 1,000 yards already, 6 touchdowns, just 1 INT. He is consistent pretty much week in and week out in this young college football season. And we know what he can do. We know he's got Brock Bowers. He's got some tremendous targets there. And Georgia, their offense has really been good in the second half of ball games. We've known that in the first half, especially against South Carolina primarily, but also against a few of the other teams they faced in Ball State, UT Martin, and UAB being the others. And they can come out a little bit sluggish on both sides of the ball, but they always turn it up at halftime in the second half of the ball games, and that is where their bread and butter is. Came off a dominant 49-21 win against UAB at the Blazers last week. DeJuan Edwards, he's had a solid start to his season as well. 32 carries at the running back position, 184 yards, and gotten in the end zone 3 times. And his backup and Kendall Milton have done pretty good as well as Roderick Robertson. The rest of this team, though, we all know their defense is still top-notch. They've lost a lot of names in the last 2 seasons, but, man, they just are just producing tremendous players on the defensive side of the ball, left and right. If you look down this lineup, there is really not much of a weak spot. Got Tyke Smith at defensive back position, Small Munden as well, Malachi Starks, Dan Jackson, Kamari Lassiter, the names go on, and all these guys, Vincent, they are absolute monsters at the defensive position end. So I think for Georgia, just keep doing what you've been doing. Play really stout, really tight defense. I would say one thing with this game as opposed to the others is you got to come out the gates hot because Auburn is looking to pull off the major upset and get a win in this historic rivalry between these two SEC ball clubs. But for Georgia, man, just keep doing what you've been doing. You're number one for a reason. Yeah, easy win against UAB last week, but I hope you've been preparing because Auburn is not going to take it easy on you this upcoming weekend. Mr. Turner, how do you think this game's going to pan out for Georgia?
I think when you look at the Georgia Bulldogs, they rank number 1 in the country. You have a lot of Georgia fans through the fan base has been very critical, which I can understand. But all I know is that you're on a tremendous winning streak. You have back-to-back national championships. You look like you're going to be a strong favorite to win your 3rd in a row. And you're winning games inside out. And in this year, you've outscored your opponents 161-45. You got the 17th best defense in the country. You got the number 1 SEC scoring defense. So I don't really know what's going on with the Georgia Bulldog Nation. All I'm going to say is to the Dogs Nation, take it one game at a time and be proud. You're number 1 in the country based on All the publicity that's been going on in Boulder with Deion Sanders, what's happening to Clemson, what's happening to Florida State. You might feel a little shunned because you haven't got that publicity down in Athens. But when I look at the polls every morning in the first 4 weeks, Georgia is still one. And you made a good point today, Mr. Logan Landers. Carson Beck has played pretty well based through all what Georgia's done this season. And then when you're looking at it overall, this game right here against Auburn, I expect Georgia's going to play at a high level because I think they got one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. The guy's been in the program, Mr. Beck, for 4 years. He's waited his time. This is still a solid Georgia football team despite all the injuries they've had. Think about when Georgia gets healthy, what type of team they're going to have then. And you got to give kudos to Kirby Smart. So all I'm going to say is this. I expect the Dogs to roll on Saturday simply because they got a coach in Kirby Smart that believes in defense. Just think about over the past few years, right now, how good is Georgia's been. Everybody talks about Stetson Bennett, his 2 great runs as being a quarterback for their national championship squad. But look at the defense. Jalen Carter with the Eagles right now. Jordan Davis with the Eagles right now. Nolan Smith with the Eagles right now. Deron Kendrick with the Rams right now. They playing high-level football, man. Channing Tindale with the Miami Dolphins, who scored 70 points this past weekend. Tonight, Green Bay and Detroit play tonight. The starting linebacker is Quay Walker. Don't worry, Dog Nation. I think we're going to see a very good balanced football team. Despite all the injuries, this still is the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yes, sir. Well said. Let's flip it over to Auburn and see how they can pull off of an upset, perhaps. Well, Auburn last week, they went up against Texas A&M. They got beat 27-10. They're going through a rough stretch of games, Vincent. A lot of talented teams. Of course, Texas A&M last week. Georgia, of course, this Saturday. Then next week, they got LSU and then Ole Miss, followed by Mississippi State. So they have a slew of very talented teams they're going to be facing off against here very soon. But looking at Auburn, I don't know what went wrong last week, but they just could not get anything going. Their passing game, they went through 3 quarterbacks for a grand total of 56 yards of offense through the air. That ain't going to get it done against any team. Their running game, that was their bright spot there. Of course, ran for 41 times for 144 yards. But really, no one took that big leap. You did have Brian Batty, 8 carries for 59. Jarquez Hunter, who is going to be getting a lot more carries from this game, 9 carries for 53. That's going to be the real key there. You got to really get the offense going. You got to get your passing game on point, whether it be Peyton Bourne, Holden Grenier, Robbie Ashford, whichever route you want to go with, you got to get something going through the air, or else it's going to be a long Saturday afternoon at your home stadium. So for Auburn, you got to play some stout defense against this Georgia offense. You really have to come ready to play. We know that Georgia, they're wanting to just get in there, get the easy win, and keep it moving. But for Auburn, they've got some good players on defense with Eugene Asante, Larry Nixon, of course. You got Jalen McLeod. You have some really good players, and up till last week, Auburn looked like, Vincent, they were going to have a pretty solid season. Big wins against Massachusetts and Samford. A tough win against California. Only won that one 14-10. But after Texas A&M, after that loss last week that has me with more questions than answers, how is Auburn going to bounce back this week? Do you think that their quarterback play is going to improve, or do you think it's going to be shaky like it was last week?
I'm going to say this to the War Eagle Nation. Hugh Freeze took the job, and I know Auburn, their fan base was really excited, but it's going to take about a year or 2 for Hugh Freeze to really get his players in. Think about this. Auburn has the worst passing game in the SEC. Number 2, maybe the wins against Massachusetts and California didn't really tell us that Auburn might be lacking in talent. The reason I say this is look what happened last week against Texas A&M. Now, Auburn has played decent run defense, no question about it, in the first 3 games. But look what their offense did when the marbles and all eyes were on you last week down there in College Station against Texas A&M. Your offensive line allowed 7 sacks. But this is the stat that really stuck out in my mind in the game. And this tells me that maybe Auburn is not as talented as we think they were coming in after their first 3 games. They allowed 15 tackles for loss. Patrick Thorne had a minus 44 yards rushing. That was against Texas A&M. For them to be even competitive against Georgia, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet here today on 100 yards football. They got to play a clean game. That means they got to have some really success in the passing game. Their offensive line has to play better. And when you look at it, no penalties for them to even be competitive, because we're talking about the #1 scoring defense in the SEC in Georgia and the number 17 ranked defense in the country. And the last time I checked, they still got stars on the side of the ball for Georgia defensively. Kamari Lassiter, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Samara Molden, Mikael Williams. He's been nicked up a little bit. He's supposed to be back on Saturday. But when you look at Auburn overall, man, they got to play a clean game offensively. And last week against Texas A&M, I'm going to bring up the stats again. The offensive line played horrible. They allowed 7 sacks and they allowed 15 tackles for loss. Plain and simple. This might not be as a talent as an Auburn football team we thought it was after the first 3 weeks of the season when they went 3-0.
Yes, sir. My final thoughts and my final score. I'm going to go with Georgia. Obviously, I think if they want to win, just keep doing what you've been doing. They've looked well, especially in the second half of the ball games. Like I mentioned, their defense tops in the nation, only allows 11 points a game. Their offense is rolling as well. And for Auburn, like Mr. Football said, you got to play perfect. You got to get something going offensively. Your offensive line has to play a lot better. Your quarterbacks have to play a whole lot better if you want to even get close to a victory in this one. So with that being said, I'm going with the Georgia Bulldogs. Get win this one. Give me Georgia 45 and give me Auburn 14 in this game. Mr. Turner, your final score.
I'm going to really agree with you. I think Georgia is going to prove to the nation that they're going to have a very solid win. I'm taking Georgia 31, Auburn 10. I think it's going to be a 3-touchdown game, and I think the Georgia Bulldogs, when we come out of college football on Saturday afternoon, we're going to still say the dogs still going to roll down in Athens, Georgia, and Vince Dooley is still living up in heavens looking down. My dogs are still the best team in the country.
Yes, sir. We will see what happens this upcoming Saturday in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Well, hey, if you have enjoyed the video here today, once again, like, comment, share, and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. And also check out our podcast each and every single week. Mr. Football Vincent Turner, as always, it's a pleasure having you come on, talk some college football with me. I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Enjoy the rest of your nights, everyone. And we'll talk to you again on another